So we talked about different hormones that affected the male reproductive system. We're going to talk again about hormones that influence the female reproductive system. And so there's a variety of different female reproductive hormones, and we're going to begin with gonadotropin releasing hormone. And so we talked about gonadotropin releasing hormone in the endocrine system as well as in the male reproductive system. So who produces gonadotropin releasing hormone? I hope you're all over this. Yep, hypothalamus. All right, and the hypothalamus produces gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it targets what? Awesome, it does. It targets the anterior pituitary gland. So it's going to stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to produce its hormones, FSH and LH, so follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So we talked about in the endocrine system how one hormone tells another endocrine gland to release its hormone. So gonadotropin releasing hormone is an example of hormonal stimulation. It is a hormone that targets another endocrine gland, the anterior pituitary, to release its hormones, FSH and LH. And FSH and LH are both produced by the anterior pituitary gland, and they target the gonad, and in this particular case it's the ovary. And so follicle stimulating hormone has the same general function in the female as it did in the male reproductive system. What was it? I hope you said gametogenesis, because it's going to stimulate oogenesis, the formation of the egg, because we're in the female reproductive system. So there's FSH as well as luteinizing hormone. And luteinizing hormone produced still by the anterior pituitary gland, and it also targets the ovary. Specifically, it targets the ovarian, the follicular cells. And so I put follicular cells on those diagrams because the luteinizing hormone is going to stimulate those cells, oh, I just gave it away, didn't I, to produce its hormones. And so it's going to cause the follicular cells to produce estrogen, more in just a few minutes. So hormonal stimulation, one endocrine gland is going to tell another endocrine gland what to do. So LH, produced by the anterior pituitary gland, is a hormone that causes the gonad, the ovary, another endocrine gland to produce its hormone. Okay? In addition to stimulating the follicular cells to produce estrogen, more in just a few minutes, it also, as the levels increase in the female reproductive system, it triggers ovulation. So in the male reproductive system, we talked about testosterone being relatively constant, and we maintain a particular level in the bloodstream. In the female reproductive system, her female reproductive hormones, they peak and then they wane. So they go up and they go down. I'm not sure if you know that already. Anyway, so I'm going to come over here to my diagram and just add a little bit. All right. Okay, so we are at puberty. That's where we're at. And so, you know me, I have to draw a picture of my sheep brain because I haven't practiced a human one before. Okay, so we have the hypothalamus right there. So it's this little spot right here, okay? And the hypothalamus is going to release gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it's going to target the anterior pituitary. And the anterior pituitary is going to release FSH and LH. So FSH is going to stimulate the maturation of this oocyte to undergo meiosis II. And then as levels of luteinizing hormone increase, it is going to trigger ovulation. Woohoo! All right, so back here, we're not done with hormones. We have estrogen, and progesterone is produced by the follicular cells. And the follicular cells produce estrogen in order to stimulate growth, maturation, and maintenance of the female reproductive structures, as well as promote proliferative phase of the uterine cycle and prepare the uterus for pregnancy. So if I come back to my diagram, these follicular cells, maybe I should use a different color. I don't know. Do I have a different color? I don't want to go too light though. Maybe I'll just highlight. So the follicular cells, under the influence, where do I want to go with this? So the follicular cells are secreting estrogen. All right. So estrogen. So the estrogen is going to be used for the proliferative phase. So we're going to talk about the uterine cycle in just a few minutes. So we're targeting the uterus. So the proliferative phase is going to target the uterus to prepare for pregnancy. So in the proliferative phase, we're going to prepare for the pregnancy. Okay? All right. So the follicular cells are like the interstitial cells. They're going to produce a hormone. In this particular case, they are going to be responsible for the proliferative phase of the uterus in order to prepare for pregnancy, okay? Because the egg's been ovulated, we don't know yet or not whether it's been fertilized. Okay. Now, progesterone is a different hormone, and progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum. And so the corpus luteum, I'm going to get a different highlighter out because you know me and my highlighters. The corpus luteum is this structure right here. So the corpus luteum used to be the follicular cells, but once the oocyte has been ovulated, they become the corpus luteum. So the follicular cells are right here. All right. Once the egg is gone, now they become the corpus luteum. All right. Now the corpus luteum is going to produce progesterone. And progesterone also targets the uterus, but progesterone is responsible for the secretory phase of the uterus. Secretory phase. And in this particular case, so it's going to promote the secretory phase of the uterine cycle, and it's going to help maintain the uterus during pregnancy. So we're going to maintain the pregnancy. Maintain it, all right? So, including that, it's also going to cause the maturation of the mammary glands and stimulate milk production, which is good for after the baby's born. All right, so we've got estrogen and progesterone, which are both produced by the support cells of the gonad, of the ovary. Specifically, the follicular cells produce estrogen, and the corpus luteum produces progesterone. All right, now, the uterine cycle. So your textbook has a great diagram of the uterine cycle, and so you can see the thickness of the uterine wall in the uterine cycle. So as we go through different days of the uterine cycle, the thickness of the wall changes. So days 1 through 5, that's when the endometrium is shed, and that's the menstrual phase. Now, days 6 through 13, that's the proliferative phase. And the proliferative phase, that's when the follicular cells, all right, so the follicular cells up here are secreting estrogen in order to prepare the uterus for pregnancy. It's causing the increase of blood supply into the uterus and building the glandular epithelium. And then day 14 is a big day because day 14, that's when LH levels peak, and that's going to trigger ovulation. There we go. Triggers ovulation. And here is an ovum that is actually erupting from the surface of the ovary during ovulation. It's pretty cool if you can find a YouTube video. Whenever I try to refilm it or show it in class, I lose so much of the resolution that it's just a blurry mess. So I quit doing that. Anyway, days 15 through 28, the remainder of that is the secretory phase. And the secretory phase, that's when we're preparing for So 15 through 28 is when the endometrium is preparing for implantation. And so the egg has been ovulated, it's traveling down the fallopian tube, the uterine tube, and we're getting near the uterus. And at this particular time, because of the progesterone levels, it's actually feeding back onto the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus, causing a decrease in FSH and LH. So over here on my diagram, the estrogen and the progesterone, they are going to inhibit FSH and LH. And we want to do that, all right? We absolutely want to do that because we want to make sure that another oocyte is not going to mature and be ovulated if this one gets, whoops, I'm not on the screen. Okay. So the estrogen, the progesterone feeds back. It inhibits FSH and LH. So FSH and LH decrease, which means that this oocyte, a different oocyte, does not mature. It does not finish meiosis II, and it is not ovulated because we only want one egg traveling down the fallopian tube and getting fertilized at a time. Okay? All right. Now the corpus luteum here is producing that progesterone, and that progesterone is promoting even more vascular growth and more glands to secrete nutrients into the uterus, okay? Because if that egg is fertilized, it takes a while before it's actually implanted in the endometrium, and we want to make sure that that growing embryo is getting enough food and nutrients in order to maintain itself so that it can implant and we can form the placenta. All right, so how are we doing? Oh, that's just fine. So fertilization and pregnancy. So the most common site of fertilization happens to be in the upper fallopian tubes, and it typically occurs within 24 hours of ovulation. So once the egg and sperm the sperm fertilizes the egg, that fertilized egg, it's a zygote, it begins mitosis, and it forms a variety of different stages. It goes in the zygote, and then it divides and divides and divides into the blastocyst and the blastula, and it finally implants into the endometrium wall. And it takes about 14 days for this to occur. So it's really important to build up that lining of the endometrium so we've got lots of blood supply, getting nutrients there, and the glands are secreting those nutrients into the uterus in order to maintain that growing ball of cells. Absolutely. Now keep in mind that the placenta is going to form from both fetal as well as maternal tissues, and as it develops, it's going to produce a hormone called HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. So the HCG is going to maintain the corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum, it's only going to produce progesterone for a short time, and then it degenerates. Those cells die, okay? And it ends up to be scar tissue in the ovary where the corpus luteum used to be. So in order to maintain the corpus luteum, HCG is going to help it, and so as we maintain the corpus luteum, it continues to produce progesterone, which inhibits FSH and LH, which inhibits another egg from being ovulated with the potential of getting fertilized. So we only want one baby maturing at a time. You never hear a pregnant woman saying, well, my first baby is due in July and then the second one is due in November. Nope. So as the fertilized egg forms and produces the placenta, it produces HCG, which maintains the corpus luteum so we can maintain the high progesterone, and so we can inhibit FSH and LH. So we inhibit the maturation of another oocyte. We inhibit the ovulation from occurring because LH levels don't get too high. Woohoo! Oh my gosh, and that's the end of the lecture. There is no more lecture. We're all done. All right. So exam number 5 is coming up. Um, Lots of hormones, and again, hormones take some memorization. So I've got lots of diagrams that I like to do, so copy over the diagrams and label those. Make some note cards. That'll definitely help you out. If you have any questions, just send me an email.